Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing on with the life of Joseph. And before we kind of saw him as this teenager that didn't really think before he acted, and now sadly the hatred that is boiling up in his brother's hearts comes into play, and by far this is one of the lowest points in Joseph's life. You could also say the point where he's thrown into prison in Egypt as well, but I think this one takes the cake to be sold by your brothers into slavery into Egypt. Is that how devastating that must have been. So with that, turn back to Genesis chapter 37. We are starting in verse 12. We're going to go through the rest of this chapter. So verse 12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, again Israel being Jacob, are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to him, Here I am. So he said to him, Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, What are you seeking? I am seeking my brothers, he said. Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock. And the man said, They have gone away, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. So, before we get into what's about to happen, you see that Jacob sends Joseph to just to see how just to see how the business of tending the flocks is going, and then come back to him. Just in a way, as you would think that as Joseph would pick up on the cues. To not tell his brothers his dream, you would think Jacob would pick up on the cues that his other sons do not really like Joseph. And so you would think that he would pick up on that and send somebody else to go and see how his brothers are doing instead of saying Joseph. You would think that. Doesn't happen here. He sends Joseph. It could be that because Joseph, at the passage prior, we were told he was 17, is very much in the midst of this transition between a boy to a man, then maybe Jacob is thinking, okay, this is a chance for Joseph to grow up or something like that. So it could be that's maybe part of it. Maybe that's why he sent Joseph. But that always got me wondering if Jacob knew or saw cues that his brothers didn't really care for Joseph. Why would he send Joseph to go and see how his brothers were doing? But yeah, that's something interesting there. And again, with Joseph, it's all about it's all about looking forward to the promises of God, and at the moment is looking forward. We are about to see the lowest point in Joseph's life, and yet there's still going to be hope within that, and we'll break that down once we get there. So verse 18, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. So you have this hatred finally come to a boiling point, and they want to kill him, and they call him a dreamer. And um, this isn't a compliment based on his dreams. This is a mockery based on his dreams. But thankfully, one of the brothers um, speaks up. Now, it turns out not to end well, but he still speaks up about the life of Joseph. Verse 21. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, Let us not take his life. And Reuben said to them, Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in this wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. So the plan, Reuben's plan is this. Hey, there's this pit here, throw him down there, don't lay a hand on him. And it seems like he is suggesting to the brothers, let him die in the wilderness. But then you have this aside right after the dialogue that says that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father. This is actually a plot by Reuben to gain favor with Jacob by restoring Joseph to his father. He wouldn't tell on his brothers, but he would seem like a savior to Joseph. A very actually underhanded way of going about this. Yes, he saves Joseph's life, but he is doing so for all the wrong reasons. Um, but they take that into account. Verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, and there was no water in it. So this is really interesting. So the point with the color of many colors, I know I didn't touch on this very much in the first part, is mainly it's obviously a gift. It's a very expensive gift, but I think the point with it is that it makes one it draws attention to the person that is wearing it, and it makes them know that this is somebody that is favored. I think that is what is behind the coat of many colors. And so the fact that they strip him of it is this very big statement that the brothers are look, this is supposed to bring attention to you, and it has, but not the good attention that you were wanting or that our father was wanting for you. Instead, that is brought an attention of hatred towards you, um, and so taking it off of him. That very much seems to be what they are signaling. The other point that's important too is about the pit, the fact that it's empty, but then the last phrase here in verse 24, there was no water in it. So it is very much, according to Reuben, the plan of letting him starve and to die in this pit. That would happen because it was empty. There's no food in there, but more importantly, there's no water in there either. Now, again, the brothers don't know Reuben's plan, but that's the idea. Um, and then how they respond to this is just so obviously the fact that they wanted to kill him is wrong. The fact that they want him to starve and to dehydrate is wrong. Uh, but then how they respond to this. Verse 25, the very first part of it. Then they sat down to eat. Oh my goodness! And you may be thinking to yourself, okay, I would never do this. But hatred has this just is such a an ugly monster that rears its head. Yes, we may not think about doing something like this, but we have at points in time gotten to a point where we have this feeling of hatred boiling up. Hopefully, it doesn't get to this level or to this degree, but we've experienced this uh, type of hatred. Again, it's not dislike, but it's wanting somebody gone. It's wanting somebody not in your realm of existence, and you just cannot stand them anymore. That is hopefully we don't experience that too often, right? That's what Jesus references when he says, even if you have a murderous thought in your heart or hatred in your heart, that is murder. Even though you didn't kill them physically, you are wanting them out of your existence and out of your realm of existence. That is murder. So we come back to that, but I think what a sad just statement there. Then they sat down to eat. Just good lord, right? I mean, it's awful to read. Uh, but then it gets a little bit worse, right? Um, if not a lot worse. But verse 25, picking up there, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. I think it's fascinating the fact that they are called Ishmaelites. So you have the grandson of Abraham being Jacob, and then you have his children or the great grandsons of Abraham um, that are interacting with the descendants of Ishmael, who is their, I guess it would be what their, I guess their great uncle. I guess would that be the right phrase? Um, Yeah, I think it would be the great uncle of these children, Ishmael, and his descendants. And it's kind of like a family reunion in a way, but for all the wrong reasons, of course, right? But they see these Ishmaelites coming, and they're obviously traders of goods. And so Judah has this idea pop into his head. Verse 26, Then Judah said to his brothers, What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to Judah. So I think verse 27, um, the end of verse 26 and 27 basically confirm that the plan is to let him starve, to dehydrate, and to die in this pit in the wilderness. They're not going to um, kill him physically, but they are going to let him die in the wilderness. Whether it is a wild animal that jumps into the pit and kills him, or just not having food and water kills him, this is the plan. And so Judah's like, look, what profit is it? What do we have to gain if we just leave him be? And so they sell him into slavery instead, to the Ishmaelites. Verse 28: Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. So we do find out that the Ishmaelites, the specific Ishmaelites, are from Midian. They're called Midianite traders. I don't think it's two groups people. It's the same. It's the same that is being described here. So they take Joseph to Egypt for 20 shekels of silver. And a shekel was about 2/5 of an ounce or 11 grams. Um, and it makes you go forward into the Gospels where Jesus is betrayed for 30 pieces or 30 shekels of silver. And the fact that Joseph is sold for even less than that shows you that uh, he's not even deemed even good enough to be sold as a slave would. And so it's just this low of lows, not just for Joseph, but for his brothers, that they truly do not care about his existence, and they see him um, as just lesser than the lowest person in society, which would be a slave at this point. It's just again, it shows you the ugliness of hatred, right? But what's interesting is that Reuben is not here. Reuben again is this guy that wanted to seem like he wanted to allow Joseph to die in the wilderness, but then secretly be his savior to get favor with Jacob, their father. But he is not here for this exchange. So, how does he respond? Verse 29. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" So it, it is so what's interesting about this is that you have Reuben is actually one of the oldest sons of Jacob, so therefore he should have the blessing that Joseph has, but he doesn't, and yet he doesn't want to kill him. He just wants favor. He just wants to use Joseph to gain favor from his father, and he comes back and he tears his clothes, which is the sign of just utter remorse, or not remorse, but guilt. And not even guilt, but just sadness. And uh, could he feel guilty about his plan um, to this scheme that he has? Maybe, but I think it's more the fact that he is just sorry that he won't get what he wants. And and then I think he realizes I'm one of the oldest brothers. It's going to fall on me and my responsibility to look after him. And now we have no proof of what happened to him. And so they come up with a plan. Verse 31. Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments. This one is actually a sense of um, of lament, and put sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol, or death, to my son, while mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites, or the Ishmaelites, had sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. And we'll get more into Potiphar next week. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Jacob is completely in grief and lament over Joseph's assumed to be death. And I think it's interesting too is that the brothers never tell Reuben actually what happened. They actually never, according to verse 30 and 31, this transition of this question, where is he? And then, well, here's this plan that we're going to do instead. It doesn't actually say that the brothers tell Reuben what actually happened. And so Reuben, who wanted to keep his brothers in the dark, actually kept in the dark by his brothers. And so I think it's interesting that dynamic there. But it is this consequence of hatred, but then there is also this hope at the end when all is lost, supposedly, and that a son of promise, Joseph, is dead, according to. Well, according to Jacob, he believes that he is dead. But yet it says, meanwhile, so while all this weeping and basically a funeral is going on for Joseph in verses 34 through and 35, you have at the same time as that is happening, there's this hope that Joseph is still alive. Now, granted, he is going into slavery into Egypt, but there is this hope there because one, he's still alive, but then two, he is going to an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. There is honor there to be received. And we will definitely see that next week. So I think that is really, really fascinating that even in the midst of the hardest of times, this dreamer and this one that is supposedly that will show us how God keeps his promises, even though it may take longer than we expect. even in the midst of his darkest moment, there is still hope to be found. And God is still at work. And I think that's really interesting to see. So we'll see that come about next week. Thanks.